A very good afternoon to our esteemed audience. My name is Ms. Lee Wan Ying, lecturer of Department of Psychology and Counseling from University Tunku Abdul Rahman, and am the MC for this event. So welcome to today's research colloquium, Industrial Organizational Psychology Trend in Southeast Asia. And it is organized by Utah and also Chulalongkorn University of Thailand, co-organized by Polytechnic University of the Philippines and Universitas Bayangkara Jakarta Raya, Indonesia. So I would like to express my appreciation on behalf of the organizing committee to everyone here joining us on this Sunday afternoon. So before we begin, here are some housekeeping rules. During the talk, your mics and videos will be turned off. We will re-enable your mic and video when it is the question and answer time. In addition, kindly take note that we will be recording the whole session for documentation purposes. Thirdly, for all participants, please fill in the sign-in sheets, which will be a link posted in the group chat below here. The sign-in sheets will be shared now. Lastly, at the end of the talk, there will be a feedback form shared, and we will also like to have a group photo session. So before we start, I would like to invite Assistant Prof. Dr. Natasuda, the Dean for the Faculty of Psychology, Chulalongkorn University, Thailand, to give an opening address for today's event.
Thank you, the Master of Ceremony, Dean Lee Lai-Meng from the Faculty of Arts and Social Science, Utah, honor guests and presenters. On behalf of the Faculty of Psychology, Chulalongkorn University, I feel so deeply honored to be part of the research colloquium in IO Psychology Trend in Southeast Asia. I would like to express my deeply appreciation to the working team to make this colloquium happen, Utah, especially Utah. I do believe that this colloquium today is the starting point for academic community in industrial and organizational psychology in Southeast Asia to develop a network, to start a community, to share the knowledge. I do believe this will help IO psychology in Southeast Asia strengthen the knowledge and be able to develop the knowledge that embrace the diversity in our regional Southeast Asia. Last but not least, I would like to thank the representative from University Bangara Chaya and Polytechnic University of the Philippines that join us in this colloquium. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Natasuda. We're so happy to have you. We would next like to invite Dr. Lee Lai-Meng, the Dean of Faculty of Arts and Social Science of University Tunku Abdul Rahman, to say a few words for today's research colloquium.
Okay, thank you, Wan Ying. Thank you, the MC. A very good afternoon to all esteemed participants who are taking their Saturday off to attend this research colloquium. I also would like to record our thanks and welcome to Dean Dr. Natasuda from Chulalongkorn University. Thank you, Dr. Natasuda, for that kind words just now. It is my great pleasure to welcome everyone to this virtual research colloquium on industrial and organizational psychology research trends in the Southeast Asia. I would like to congratulate and thank the main organizers, Chulalongkorn University, Thailand, and of course, University Tunku Abdul Rahman, our co-organizing university partners, Universitas Bayangkara Jakarta, and Polytechnic University of the Philippines. Your dedication to gathering and building the research community on industrial and organizational psychology is much appreciated. Your effort has provided a platform for like-minded people with similar interests to come together to learn and inspire each other through knowledge sharing. I hope that all the participants who attend this research colloquium today will gain knowledge, but also develop a deep interest and generate new ideas in the industrial and organizational psychology research areas. May researchers and students alike stir each other's passion in these much needed and important IO topics that makes the workplace and well-being of employers and employees in Southeast Asia better. I would like to congratulate the participants, the 4 researchers who will be presenting their papers today on their research findings and sharing of knowledge with our participants. Once again, I would like to thank everyone for taking their time out on their busy schedule, especially on a weekend, to participate in this event. Thank you very much. I hope that everyone will have a very productive research colloquium. Thank you. Over back to you, Wan Ying. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. So let us now pass the time to the host of the colloquium today, Associate Professor Dr. Tan Chee-Seng.
Hi, thank you, Wan Ying. Okay, so without further delay, I think I should invite our first speaker, Dr. Jennifer. Hi, Jennifer. All right, so Jennifer, perhaps you can start sharing your slide while I'm going to introduce you. Okay, so our first speaker, Dr. Jennifer, okay, currently is a lecturer in IO psychology from Chulalongkorn University of Thailand. All right, and she will be sharing with us her findings about the impact of inequalities, okay, from the findings in Thailand. All right, so without further delay, so ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome Dr. Jennifer. So Dr. Jennifer, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And hello, everyone. Before I begin my presentation, I would like to say that today's presentation is actually a part of the cross-cultural project that I am working with researchers from University of Queensland, Australia, and also University of Exeter. So I would like to thank them for initiating this research as well. But because of the theme of today's research colloquium, I would like to focus on the data that were collected from employees in Thailand. Okay, so as we know that inequality in the workplace has been like a global issue that organizations are facing. This research focuses on 2 types of inequality, pay inequality and gender inequality in the workplace. So for pay inequality, we define it as the degree of pay differences between the highest paid employees and the lowest paid employees. And this is quite a pressing issue that many organizations around the world is facing. And at the same time, gender inequality can be seen in many countries, and it occurs in many areas within the workplace, such as recruitment, selection, promotion, learning opportunities, and also exiting, such as layoff. So in the past, research has shown that inequality in the workplace can lower positive organizational outcomes. For example, it could increase turnover intentions among employees. It could reduce employees' sense of cooperation and shared organizational identification. So we want to solve this problem in many countries. However, even though we have studies that examine inequality, but much of this work has yet to examine how perceived inequality, especially both pay inequality and gender inequality, how is that like related to deviant workplace behaviors, which are the voluntary behaviors that could damage the well-being of the organization and people within it. So my study focused on the concept of everyday resistance, which can be considered as deviant workplace behaviors as well. But we argue that unlike social movements or organizations, organized protests or extreme deviant behaviors, everyday resistant behaviors is typically hidden or disguised, and it may even appear quite commonplace. For example, employees might be working slowly or not following company's rule. So we argue that higher inequality would increase the salience of differences between groups. that could be highest paid employees and lowest paid employees, and also male and female employees. And this inequality has been shown to increase a sense of threat among employees. So we propose that this high inequality would elicit perceptions of injustice, or it would instill a sense of hostility. And that in turn would drive behaviors which could lower the fulfillment of organizational goals, such as everyday resistant behaviors. So we proposed the first hypothesis, which examined perceived organizational justice and how it would mediate the relationship between inequality and likelihood of everyday resistance. And we broke it down into 1A, examining pay inequality, and 1B, examining gender inequality. And in addition, the literature has highlighted the importance of organizational culture. And for the purpose of this presentation, I will use the terms organizational norms and culture interchangeably. So we know that this culture or norms could guide policies and practices within an organization, and it is reflective of how employees think or perceive of an organization. And we know that culture or norms could influence employee attitudes and behaviors as well. So Robert and Wasey, they actually adopted the concept of individualism and collectivism at a national level and described that organizations have individualism and collectivism orientation as well at an organizational level. So if organizations are high in individualism, we would expect to see competition, independency, personal accomplishment, and development. On the other hand, organizational collectivism would emphasize strong interpersonal relationships, a sense of loyalty, and collective sense of responsibility and decision-making. So we proposed hypotheses 2 and 3, which examine the moderating effect of these organizational norms on the relationship between inequality and perceived organizational justice. And again, we broke them down into 2A, 2B, and 3A and 3B. So to summarize, we examined 2 moderating mediation models, one for pay inequality on the left-hand side and one for gender inequality on the right-hand side. And for both of the models, we examined perceived organizational justice as a mediator and organizational individualism and collectivism as moderators. For methodology, the sample consists of 243 employees who are currently working full-time in an organization from various industries and were residing in Thailand. The majority of them were female, and the mean age was 33 years. And we collected data using an online survey via Qualtrics, and the participants were randomly recruited through social media advertisements and researchers' networks. So first, to measure pay inequality, we first asked participants to indicate the income of the top 20 and the bottom 20 within their organization. And we did so because we wanted to prime them to think of the pay distribution within their organization. And after that, we asked the participants to rate how equal or unequal they think the pay distribution is between the top 20 and the bottom 20 at their organization. So this would be the score for pay inequality. Next, for gender inequality, we use 5 items to assess a perception of gender discrimination in the workplace. So again, this is a perception of the degree to which gender discrimination exists within their organization. Next, for organizational individualism and collectivism, we use 13 items from perceived organizational culture. 6 items measured individualistic orientation norms, and 7 items measured collectivistic orientation norms. For perceived organizational justice, we use 6 items to assess overall perceived justice within the organization. And the last, for everyday resistance measured, we adopted a measure of workplace deviance by Bennett and Robinson to assess the likelihood that the participants would engage in everyday resistant behaviors. So we argued that these 19 behaviors tap into our definition of everyday resistance. For example, neglecting to follow your boss instructions, or being late to work, or bullying. Okay, and here is descriptive findings. So for hypothesis testing, starting with the first model, which examined pay inequality. So we found that organizational justice fully mediated the relationship between pay inequality and likelihood of everyday resistance. However, and surprisingly, that pay inequality was positively related to organizational justice. So the direction was opposite from what we proposed. So the more pay inequality is, the more employees would perceive organizational justice. This is quite interesting. So for moderating effects of organizational norms, these were not significant. So the relationship between pay inequality and perceived organizational justice was not conditioned upon organizational norms. So next, for gender inequality, quite similar to the previous model, we found that organizational justice fully mediated the relationship between gender inequality and the likelihood of everyday resistance. And as expected, gender inequality was negatively related to organizational justice. So if employees perceive gender inequality, they are less likely to perceive organizational justice. So this is congruent to how we proposed. So in terms of moderating effect of organizational norms, we found a significant moderating effect of organizational collectivism, but not individualism. So we plot an interaction between gender inequality and we plot an interaction between gender inequality and organizational collectivism. So even though we need to run a simple slope analysis next, but if you look at the plot, we could highly assume that at high organizational collectivism, the relationship between gender inequality and organizational justice was not significant. However, at low organizational collectivism, gender inequality was negatively related to organizational justice. So we found this interaction. Okay, to summarize, our findings suggested that first, employees who perceived unfairness within the organization are likely to engage in everyday resistance in the workplace. So I think this is what we expected to see. Unexpectedly and surprisingly, perception of pay inequality is likely to increase a perception that an organization is fair and just, which in turn decreases a likelihood that employees will engage in everyday resistant behaviors such as bullying, gossiping, not following instructions. And we kind of discussed that this could be explained maybe by power distance cultural value in Thailand. So according to Hofstede, Thailand is pretty high in power distance, which means that employees kind of accept that power is distributed unequally within organizations, and there should be social hierarchy within organizations. And we know that pay is shown to be an indicator of social status and power. So maybe employees who see pay inequality within their organizations, they might think that an organization is doing something right or being fair, being just. So they accept of this pay inequality. However, this is something that we need to explore further before we can make a conclusion. Next, as expected, perception of gender inequality is likely to decrease a perception that an organization is, which in turn decreases a likelihood of everyday behaviors. And I think this is quite interesting because if you look at statistics in Thailand, some people argue that gender inequality is not extremely prevalent compared to other countries. Women are given maybe not equal opportunities, but there are not extreme inequality between the two genders. In organizations with low collectivist culture, higher gender inequality is more likely to lower a perception that an organization is fair. So if employees are working in organizations that don't encourage interpersonal relationships or a sense of loyalty or a shared responsibility among employees, if employees perceived gender inequality, they are more likely to think that an organization is unfair. So definitely, we are aware that our study has limitations. So first, we understand that social status and gender might be intersectional. So in the next future, we might have to control for gender and job position in further analyses. And in this, more importantly, the measure that we use to assess organizational individualism and collectivism kind of overlook the vertical and horizontal dimension of it. For example, this is an item that measures collectivism, which says, regardless of hierarchical level, employees take each other's view into consideration. So you see that this kind of taps into a horizontal dimension of collectivism rather than the vertical dimension of collectivism. And some people argue that Thailand is high in vertical dimension of collectivism rather than horizontal dimension of collectivism. So the next step that we are going to explore cross-cultural differences between the data in Thailand and in the UK. So we have both of the data sets, so we just need to analyze it, and we hope to have the findings pretty soon. So thank you so much for coming to my presentation and listening to my presentation. I would appreciate any questions and any feedback. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Jennifer, for the interesting presentations. And of course, I think the findings is also interesting. Okay, so here comes to the Q&A sections. So ladies and gentlemen, you are now allowed to start your video, unmute yourself, okay, to communicate with the speaker, Dr. Jennifer. Of course, okay, if you have any questions, feel free to post them on the chat box, and I will help you to read your questions to Dr. Jennifer. Okay, so while waiting for the participants' questions, Dr. Jennifer, I hope you don't mind. I take the advantage of being the moderators. Okay, I'm quite curious. Okay, what interests you? Okay, to now start this the research, or you start investigating the impact of inequalities in Thailand?
So the researchers at University of Queensland, they have been examining pay inequality for quite some time. I would say like for the last 5 years. So they want to extend the impact of pay inequality in the workplace. And I think in the past, they kind of published an article on the impact of pay inequality on organizational identification. So they start this idea that they want to see whether pay inequality would lead to negative outcomes, such as deviant behaviors and everyday resistance. And I'm particularly interested in cross-cultural psychology. So we came together and discussed about examining pay inequality in a cross-cultural context. So we started with a cross comparison between employees in the UK and in Thailand. Which should be a great comparison because UK is low in power distance and they're high in individualism, and Thailand is high in power distance but low in individualism. So it would be a great start for a cross-cultural comparison.
Okay, thank you so much. And we have a question from Dr. Wustari. So let me read it for you, Dr. Jennifer. What do you think about the culture? Do you think the types of culture, such as Indonesians, Thailand, Malaysia, and the Philippines, will have a different result?
Thank you. That's a very great question. I think just an assumption that there would be differences in terms of gender inequality, because looking at statistics across these countries, some people argue that Thailand, we don't really have a problem of gender inequality. This is what some people make an argument. Some people argue that we still have high gender inequality. But if you look at a pay gap, between males and females in Thailand is not extremely high. And I would say that the gap is quite low in Thailand compared to Indonesia, Malaysia, and Philippines. So we might see a difference between the relationship of pay and gender inequality on justice across these nations. Well, hopefully I could explore this potential.
All right. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, okay, do take this opportunity, okay, to post your questions or ask questions to Dr. Jennifer. So Dr. Jennifer, just now you mentioned that the pay inequalities is relatively low in Thailand compared to Indonesians and Malaysia. I'm thinking whether based on your own opinions, okay, whether you have any advice for us how we can reduce the inequalities, let's say in Malaysia.
Oh, in terms of pay? Okay, I think I would say like the leaders have a great impact on this decision. So because if you look at the statistics over here that the average compensation of the highest paid employees, such as CEOs, it grew by almost 19% compared to like only 4% of other workers that could be like frontline employees or middle paid employees. So the leaders, such as CEOs, might come together and really, discuss this among the team.
And sorry, I keep asking questions.
It's okay.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, feel free to stop me, okay? If you have any questions, you can raise your hand using the reaction button at the bottom, or you can unmute yourself, just stop me from asking questions. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so we have questions from Amira. How would you further explore the social hierarchy in Thailand that potentially affect the perceptions of pay inequalities? Would it be any different from the general idea of social hierarchy at the workplace, such as leader versus subordinate, or would there be more cultural elements in it?
That's a very interesting point. Like I said in one of the limitations, that I think job position plays a very big role in this, because if you are high in job positions, such as you have a managerial position and get paid quite a lot, maybe you would not think that pay inequality would lead to unjust. So I would say that maybe we can first control the job position. But in terms of social hierarchy, I was thinking the other day that maybe social hierarchy orientation, like power distance, individual level of power distance orientation could moderate the relationship between pay inequality and perceived organizational justice. So if you're lenient towards social power distance, you believe that a society should have social hierarchy and that would benefit the organization. So if you have a belief that social hierarchy would benefit the organizations, then maybe pay inequality would not lead to perceived organizational injustice. So I think maybe next we could explore this individual level of power distance orientation.
Sorry for the interruption.
Yes, okay.
You may continue.
Yeah. For that one, or maybe the job position, such as leader versus subordinate, could be a moderating effect between pay inequality and perceived organizational justice as well. Yeah, I did not, to be honest, I did not control for gender and job position yet because we just finished data collection last week. So this is sort of like a preliminary findings that we have at the moment. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing this latest data analysis result with us, Dr. Jennifer.
But thank you, Amira, for your comments and your feedback. I think this is a very interesting idea that definitely I'll take it and explore about this.
Yeah, indeed. So, ladies and gentlemen, any more questions for Dr. Jennifer? Okay, I see. Okay, any more questions? Anyone would like to unmute yourself and communicate with Dr. Jennifer? Hi, Dr. Jennifer. I'm wondering, is there any relationship between the pay inequalities and the gender inequalities in your data set?
Oh, so if we look at the correlation table, no, we don't have a significant correlation between pay inequality and gender inequality. And if I remember correctly, the England sample, within the England sample, there's no correlation between two types of inequality as well.
Okay. Okay, any more questions? Okay, so there's one question from Suwan. Hi, Dr. Jennifer. May I know what are some typical forms of job-related inequality in Thailand? Will the employees in different industry experience different inequalities treatment? Thank you.
Thank you. I think in terms of like gender inequality, you would see a big gap between male and females. For example, engineering is a big one, and I think that's not only in Thailand, it's not found only in Thailand, but in other countries as well. There's a big stereotype that engineers should be men. In Thailand, we have this stereotypical image that male engineers might perform better. So I would assume, and I think there's statistics showing that there's a big inequality in terms of like gender inequality and pay inequality in engineering industry.
Okay, so Suwan, if you have follow-up questions, yeah, feel free to post it on the chat box or you can unmute yourself. Meanwhile, I think we still have time to take one more questions. So ladies and gentlemen, do grab this opportunity. Dr. Jennifer, just out of curiosity, because just now you showed us that there was no significant correlation between the pay inequalities and gender inequalities. I wonder this is within your expectation.
The researchers at University of Queensland who's been doing research on pay inequality, they did not find this surprising. So they say that pay inequality is quite separate from gender inequality, and that's why we examined the two types of inequality separately. So I know, like I mentioned, that gender and social status are intersectional. I think it might have an effect, but there's still like two different constructs that we need to examine separately. Yeah, so those researchers argue quite strongly that they're not surprised about this and there are different constructs.
Okay, thank you so much, because at the first glance, I thought that there will be relators, because it seems to me that gender could play common factors in both types of inequalities.
There might be an interaction to explore about this. Yeah.
That's what I thought as well. So I'm thinking whether on top of the two moderators, whether gender inequalities could be the third moderator.
We kind of talk about having gender as an antecedent of pay inequality. So male and female might perceive pay inequality differently. So that was one of our ideas too, but we didn't put that in the model because it's already complex.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
agree with you. Yeah.
Yes.
So we look forward to hearing from more findings from Dr. Jennifer about the impacts of the inequalities on the performance. So yeah, I think that comes to the end of the first presentation. Thank you, Dr. Jennifer.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.